Hi, I'm Dr. Eugene O'Loughlin and welcome to this lesson on problem solving techniques. This lesson is going to be about what we call MoSCoW analysis. Our objectives for this lesson are that by the end of the lesson you should be able to do the following. You should be able to define what a requirement is. We're usually talking about requirements when we're talking about MoSCoW analysis. And then we're going to prioritize requirements based on the letters from the MoSCoW analysis: must, could, should, and won't. So we'll see what that means in a few moments. We're in section 2 of our problem solving techniques. This section is about improvement priorities identification, and MoSCoW analysis is the third of the 3 techniques in this section. Let's, as always in our lessons, start out with a quote. This one is from Elon Musk, I'm sure you all know, and he once said, "If you're trying to create a company, it's like baking a cake. You have to have all the ingredients in the right proportion." So my interpretation of this for our problem solving techniques course is that we need to be able to decide which things are more important than others, what proportion we should do things, what are the things that we do, and what are the things that we don't do. So MoSCoW analysis is just one method of helping us in this case. So let's straight away jump in and see what the letters in MoSCoW analysis. You can see at the top of my screen I have a capital M, a capital S, a capital C, and a capital O. And the analysis doesn't have anything to do with the lovely city of Moscow itself. The M stands for must, the S stands for should, the C stands for could, and the W stands for won't. So let's see what we mean by all of these. So as I said in the introduction there, MoSCoW analysis is very often used with requirements. So for example, if you were a business analyst or working in a business analyst capacity, you might be gathering or eliciting loads of requirements for a new project. And there might, in many cases, be hundreds, if not thousands, of requirements for some very, very large projects. And as you can imagine, some requirements are more important than others. Some have to be done and some may not be done at all. So let's take a look at a formal definition of what a requirement is, and this one comes from the IIBA, the International Institute of Business Analysis. And they define a requirement as, and I quote, "a condition or capability that must be met or possessed by a solution or a solution component to satisfy a contract, standard, specification, or other formally imposed documents." So in other words, we have gathered a requirement from, say, a stakeholder on a project, and we want to be able to document that requirement, and we have to decide then, when we have all our requirements gathered, which ones are we going to implement and which ones are we not going to implement or perhaps implement later. So requirement, as it says in the IIBA documentation, is a usable representation of a need. So how do we use MoSCoW analysis to help us decide about the requirements, what priorities in this case? So we want to prioritize requirements, and we should have criteria on which we base this prioritization. So we don't just go and make things up. We need to have some criteria. And here's an example taken from my own book, An Introduction to Systems Business Analysis. And I've got the criteria here on the left-hand side and a description for each one. So my criteria are: we might prioritize requirements based on value, based on risk, level of difficulty, the likelihood of success, the need for compliance, relationships with other requirements, stakeholder requirements, and urgency, something that needs to be done quickly. Now, I'm not going to go through each of these here. I'm going to focus in on compliance. You may pause the video here if you want to take a read of the other criteria and the descriptions associated with them. So let's say, for example, you wanted to prioritize requirements based on compliance. It may well be a legal requirement that a certain requirement might have to be included in the solution. So, for example, needs around the likes of data protection and data confidentiality and so on. So there may well be a legal reason or a regulatory reason as to why something has to be prioritized. So let's go through each of the 4 letters associated with MoSCoW analysis. The M for must requirement, these are regarded as the ones that are non-negotiable. You have to do these ones. No matter how difficult or easy or expensive or cheap or whatever, these are the ones that must be done. And the reason is because without them, the project would fail. So we have to include them. So we all have to, in our groups or in our teams or in our seminars or in our business environment, we have to get agreement on what these requirements are. So these are the really, really important ones. And we'll talk a little bit later on about how much of your overall solution should be a must requirement. Then we come to the S. And this S stands for should, and for most projects, the S requirements are going to be implemented. So the should requirements are those that should be implemented if at all possible. There may well be some reason why they might not be done, such as, for example, too expensive, but they should be done most of the time. They are high priority, but they can be satisfied in different ways. And again, these should be agreed in your teams or in your groups. Then we come to the C in MoSCoW analysis, and this stands for could. So the could requirements are these are the nice to haves. They should only be included if appropriate resources are available. So you might delay these to another time, but you could do these requirements. You could have these as part of your solution if you have the resources available to it. If you have not got the resources, then you don't do these requirements. And then finally, the W of MoSCoW analysis stands for won't. And these are requirements that will not be implemented now or at all or ever. They might be implemented at a later time. So for example, if these are software requirements, you would have in, say, version 1 of the software all your must and should requirements. In version 2 and version 3, you might have your could, and perhaps your won't requirements might come in a later version as well. So these are the ones that are ones that you must leave out at this stage. But they could be done later, so keep them in mind. So let's take a look at a very, very simple example of how MoSCoW analysis can be used. Let's say you want to allow users to manage their accounts on a website. So many of us have accounts on websites, so we should understand what this is all about. And I've come up with 5 simple requirements here. There will be many more, but I'm just using these 5 for illustration purposes here. And I've named these requirements A, B, C, D, and E. So requirement A is that the users can log on to the website. Now, there's not much point in having a website where users need to manage their accounts if they can't log on to it. So this is a must-have requirement. So we label this as M or label it as a must. Requirement B is a little bit different. Users should be able to avail of a forgotten password utility if they forget their password. So this is a should requirement. It's not absolutely necessary, but in most circumstances, this type of thing should be included. Requirement C, users can change account details. Again, this is a manage user accounts, and there's not much point in having this if the users cannot change their details, such as change their address or phone number or something. And once again, this is a must-have requirement. Then we come to the final 2 requirements. Requirement D is that the user can send an email to the system requesting a change to the account page on the website. Now, obviously, and when users are managing their websites, they may need to have changes made that they can't do themselves. And who do they contact and where do they go? So it might well be a support desk, it might well be an email, as the case here, or it might be a telephone number, or other way of contacting some support. So in our case here, I'm going to label this as a could requirement. If we have the resources to do it, let's implement it. And finally then, requirement E is when a user clicks on a phone number on the web page, a call is made automatically from their desk phone to that number. And that's that might be something useful to have, but for now, we're not going to implement this requirement. So we're going to put this down as a won't. We mightn't do it at all, or we might do it at a later stage. So MoSCoW analysis then gives us some idea about what is in scope for a project and what is out of scope. So the M, the must, the S, the should, and the C, the coulds, most of these requirements would be within scope in a project. And the won't requirements are out of scope, certainly for now. And something to remember about out of scope, that if a requirement is not on the scope statement, we don't do it. We only do what's on the scope statement. So must, should, and could generally are pointers towards that. Now, how much of our requirements can we have as must? Clearly, a project where all requirements, all hundreds and thousands of requirements are must-haves is not going to work. We mightn't have the resources to do all of that. And we know that some requirements are more important than others. So we need to be able to identify the must-haves. And we must have this flexibility in the level of requirements which must be delivered. And a rule of thumb, and this one comes from the Agile Business Consortium, and they say that the safe percentage of must-have requirements in order to be confident of project success is not to exceed 60% must-have effort. That, of course, is going to vary from project to project, but this gives you an indication of what should work here. And typically then, obviously the W is going to have 0%, and the S and C for should and could typically would have 20% each. Those two 20% added to the 60, of course, make up the full project. So So it gives you a rule of thumb as to how many must-haves you should have in a project. So if you're going over that percentage, it might be an idea to go back in and maybe change some of the must-haves to should-haves or could-haves. In the section that follows this lesson, I'm going to ask you to do an assignment, and this is an assignment that works really well for me when I have a live classroom with, say, 20 to 25 students. And I ask the students in the class to think of their dream house. So I write down on the board anything they say. I say to them, you have anything you want in your dream house. So people come up with, a bathroom on every floor, a big large kitchen, walk-in wardrobes, helipads, swimming pools, snooker room, and so on. So we in a team, we work out all of the dream requirements that we want in our house, brainstorm all these ideas and document them all. And then we go through them and conduct a MoSCoW analysis. So clearly, every dream house is not going to have every single requirement. So what are the must-haves? So obviously you must have electricity, you must have water and stuff like that. But, maybe the helipad could wait until a later one. So more about that in the assignment. And this is one that's fun to do with a team and really, really works to help understand what MoSCoW analysis is all about. So in summary, we use MoSCoW analysis to prioritize requirements. The must requirements should be regarded as non-negotiable. We have to do these. The should requirements are those that should be implemented if at all possible. The could requirements are those that are nice to have. If we have the resources to do them, we will. And finally, the won't requirements are those that will not be implemented. So that's the problem-solving technique, MoSCoW analysis. I hope you found this video useful.